What is up, guys? And we are back with another video. And in this video, we're going to be breaking down the main stat combination for Kazuha to see which one is the most optimal and the pros and cons of each one. And we're going to be looking at 3 different combinations. Okay, so the first build is going to be a full elemental mastery build. And what I mean by that is we're going to have 3 elemental mastery mains. With this build, I'm going to be sitting at 1000 attack as well as 688 elemental mastery, and my crit damage is only 90%. The second combination we're going to be looking at is going to be a hybrid elemental mastery build. So what I mean by that is we're going to have elemental mastery, anemo bonus damage, as well as crit damage. And as you guys can tell, with this build, I have around the same attack. My elemental mastery drops down, and that's because I lose out on 2 elemental mastery pieces, but in exchange my crit damage goes up to 140% and my anemo damage bonus goes up to 61.6%. And the very last one is going to be a main DPS combination, and that's going to be with attack percentage as well as anemo bonus damage and crit damage. And with this one, as you guys can see, my attack goes up to 1400, and the reason for that is because we switched to an attack percent sans. But my crit damage is still around the same, it's only 5% higher at 145, and that's only because of substats, and my anemo bonus damage is also the same as 61.6%. So those are going to be the artifact combinations we're going to be testing, and as you guys can tell, I try to keep the artifact sets as close as possible, and the only things changing are going to be the main stats. So now let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to be testing this. So the very first thing we're going to be looking at is going to be the swirl damage with one enemy as well as the swirl damage with multiple enemies. The second thing we're going to be looking at is the abilities, including the E ability as well as the Q ability. And the last thing we're going to be looking at is the support capability, meaning how is our main DPS improving with the elemental mastery bonus from Kazuha's Ascension 4 passive. And for those of you who don't know what his passive does, basically for every point of elemental mastery that Kazuha has, 0.4% of it turns into an elemental damage bonus depending on the element you swirl. And you can actually swirl multiple elements, meaning if you swirl both hydro and cryo at the same time in a freeze comp, you're going to be getting both a hydro and cryo damage bonus, making Kazuha super valuable, but we're going to see how that looks like among the 3 combinations. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the testing. The first thing we're going to be starting off with is the main DPS build, meaning we're going to have attack percent, anemo bonus damage, as well as crit damage. So let's go ahead and start with his auto attacks as well as his swirl damage. So we do 1113 with our auto attacks. Let's go ahead and see how much swirl damage we do. So we do 2015 per swirl. Let me also give you guys an example of how swirl looks like against multiple enemies. So as you guys can see, when you have multiple enemies grouped together and you trigger a swirl reaction, it actually triggers multiple swirls on each enemy. So that doesn't mean if you have a group of 5 or 6 enemies, each one is going to get swirled 5 or 6 times. It only goes up to 2. So for example, right here on these guys, I'm going to be doing 2 swirls on each one. So in total, it'll be 6 swirls. And there you guys go. But also one bonus is if you have an additional element, meaning if you have a pyro and a hydro and you trigger swirl, you can actually trigger swirl 3 times on each enemy. So I'm going to try to showcase what that looks like right now with both Kaya and Barbara as well as Kazuha. So the goal here is to apply cryo on one enemy and then hydro on the other and see how many swirls we get. So we're going to apply cryo on those guys and then we're going to apply hydro on these guys and then we'll trigger a swirl. Okay, and as you guys saw right there was 2 cryo swirls as well as a hydro swirl. So this only works if you have multiple elements and there's multiple enemies, but the max amount of swirls you can get is 3, but only 2 of the same element. But to sum it up in the easiest way possible, basically more elements equals more swirls, up to 3 swirls max. So now that you guys know how his swirl mechanic works, let's go ahead and look at his E ability as well as his Q ability, and then break it down depending on if there's one enemy and if there's multiple enemies. After each test, I'm going to go ahead and put the numbers up on screen for you guys, and then towards the end, we'll compare all of the numbers for all the different combinations. Okay, and like I said, the very last thing we're going to be looking at is how much the support is, meaning how much damage bonus are we going to be getting for our main DPS. Let's go ahead and look at that. So at base value, my Kaya has a 61.6% cryo damage bonus, and he's hitting for a 14.8k E ability. And with Kazuha's passive active, it only increases by 6%. And the reason for that is because we don't have any elemental mastery from our main stats. So let's go ahead and see what the damage looks like with the 6% boost. Okay, and with the boost, it goes up to 19.6k. Okay, so next up, we're going to be testing the Hybrid Elemental Mastery combination. This means Elemental Mastery, Anemo bonus damage, and crit damage. Okay, and as you guys can see, with one Elemental Mastery piece, the cryo damage bonus goes up to 73.4%, so in total it's almost a 12% increase compared to the attack percent piece where it was only a 6% increase. Okay, and as you guys can see, Kaya's attack goes up to 20.3k. Okay, and last up is a full Elemental Mastery build. And again, with this, our attack is around the same compared to the Hybrid Elemental Mastery one, and that's because they both use the same Elemental Mastery sands. Our Elemental Mastery, on the other hand, is a lot higher. That's because we lose out on Anemo bonus damage as well as crit damage. And that's why our crit damage drops down to 90%, and our Anemo bonus damage drops down to 15%. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with his auto attacks. So 663, so his auto attacks are a lot less compared to the main DPS one. Okay, and as you guys can tell right here, Kaya's cryo damage bonus with a full Elemental Mastery Kazuha goes up to 89.1%. Now this is a 27.5% damage increase compared to the 12% we got with one Elemental Mastery piece. And then the damage goes up to 22.1k. And there we go, guys. That pretty much wraps up all the testing and every single combination. So let's go ahead and break down the numbers and talk about the pros and cons of each combination. So when it comes to multi-target damage, the full Elemental Mastery combination just blows all the other combinations out of the water. When it comes to the burst with multi-target as well as the E ability with multi-target, it severely outscales even a full DPS build. But when it comes to single target damage, when it comes to a full Elemental Mastery build, that's where it really struggles because the damage falls off quite a bit compared to the other two. And now when we compare the other two, you guys can tell that Elemental Mastery and attack percent are very, very close. Like there's basically a very small difference that you could really go either way. Honestly, I just recommend going the one you have better substats for, even though ideally I think Elemental Mastery is still better. And the reason for that comes down to the support capability. So even though the damage difference between the full DPS set and the hybrid set is not a lot, when it came to the support, you guys saw that the hybrid set actually gave double the cryo damage bonus than the full DPS set. And that number was 6% for the full DPS set and close to 12% with the hybrid set. But then when it came to support for the full EM set, it just blew the other two out of the water again, because the damage bonus went all the way up to almost 30% compared to 12% and 6%. Because the cool thing about going full Elemental Mastery is you don't have to worry about substats at all. Because look at my substats right here, like I have 27% defense. I even have all flat stats right here. Whereas if you go full DPS with attack percent as well as Anemo bonus damage, you're going to want to worry about these substats. You're going to want to get as much crit damage as possible, as much attack percentage as possible. But with Elemental Mastery, that's not something you have to worry about. Overall, I think the results are pretty clear because when it comes to a multi-target, full EM just blows the other two out of the water. But then when it comes to bosses or just single targets, then you can really go between attack percent and EM. That's up to you. Honestly, I think the substats are going to make the biggest difference because the damage difference between the two is really not that much. But that's pretty much it for me, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions about this or what other things you guys want to see. Hopefully this helped you out. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.